Hey everybody, welcome to the September open office hours with Trace Labs and OriginTrail team. Today we have Branimir, Žiga, and Tomaž as usual. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey guys.
Hey.
How's the end of your summer been going? Things are busy over there, but how's the weather?
Well, the weather's keeping up actually. We're having another 14 days of beautiful sunshine and warm temperatures. So yeah, it's a lot of kind of too much work versus how much the weather is keeping up.
Žiga looks like he's keeping busy tending to the farm over there too, so that's good. So hopefully it's a good crop yield this year.
I'm even having good company here. That's Sveto, my dog.
That's the pleasure.
This is, I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is an 18th century wooden building that used to be used for keeping the hay dry at the farm. So we kind of renovated it. It's still standing, and right now it serves as an office, as a natural office.
That's right. Hey, this day and age, you got to work where you can, right? All right, I'll jump into the questions now. Let's see. All right, after Parity and Trace Labs have improved scalability on the consensus layer, do you envision working together on other areas? If so, what might those be? And so I want to say it's awesome news that we heard you guys, Parity and OriginTrail and Trace Labs are working together, and Parity joined the Trace Alliance, which is massive. I think it gives them a lot of exposure to a lot of the clients that you're working with to help kind of legitimize what they're doing. And at the same time, it seems like it's a real benefit for your team in order to really expand the ODN and bring it to, not just Ethereum now, we're starting to see it merge into other blockchain ecosystems. So how is that relationship? What are the main goals? What is the consensus layer one consensus changes look like, and what future collaborations could that come from that?
Yeah, I think I'll kick it off a little bit, and then I guess I'm sure there's going to be more things to add in. I guess I'd start with from the last question, which is around the kind of how is it working with them, and then kind of how the collaboration works out. And I have to say we were really pleasantly surprised to kind of meet a lot of different stakeholders from Polkadot ecosystem, from Parity, from Web3 Foundation, and we just all around have had a very good impression. There was a very good alignment in terms of what's the thinking around the technology and how we see the things developing in the future, and kind of the different approaches that they are taking, and kind of they were also envisioned within OT from the get-go. So it was almost refreshingly nice to be connected with the likes of Parity, and Fabian as well was a great addition to the working group, as well as the even in the initial discussions already kind of giving a lot of very interesting insight that will help us, and is already helping us in the way we see the whole thing going forward. So in terms of the relationship, we got to say that it's been very, very nice working with them. We struggle to find anything negative really at this point. And I do second your thoughts on kind of Parity joining the Trace Alliance working group. It's something that we're seeing as a very, very positive thing, because it will allow us to focus on the key areas of decentralization and tokenomics, of which kind of is the consensus layer's task in the OriginTrail stack, and kind of having a link to a team like Parity, which has been working on, part of their team, that obviously Gavin building out the Ethereum, and also now throughout the Polkadot, kind of they've really accumulated a lot of experience, a lot of insight into what's the best approaches that we feel that we can also benefit from, being that kind of our obviously initial focus really lies within the data knowledge graph, and then making this happen, whereas utilizing the consensus layer for what is useful. The one thing that maybe I saw from just the initial responses as being maybe not entirely grasped yet is that the working group is about decentralization and tokenomics. So this really is not just about the gas fees. And it might have seemed that it kind of is in a risk that Polkadot joining or Parity joining the trace lines is a response towards the increasing gas fees on Ethereum, and it's kind of like just a response for that. It rather is a little bit wider. So like we've stated, OriginTrail has had blockchain agnosticism in the vision since the get-go. It was something that was always meant to happen. Undoubtedly the situation in Ethereum with fees, which is also kind of result of a usage, is something that maybe shifted the priority of something like that happening a bit higher. But still, we feel that with or without the challenges, the setup with Parity is something that's really beneficial to achieving that initial vision, which again goes beyond just the mere handling the fees. It's more about how can we structure for the trace to have a better or more even utility. How can we grasp more value of what's currently happening on two networks, which is Ethereum and ODN? How can we really see if that, obviously with the increasing fees, that value was kind of, it was out of proportion, right? So it's really high on the Ethereum side versus the trace. And here we see that there's a space of approaching this in a smart way where we can have a better division between that, or even more utility towards the side of the trace. So seeing how can actually this network, the ODN, which is now over 550 nodes, it's growing very rapidly and it's very nice. And there's the infrastructure that can be utilized and can deliver value. And it's definitely something that within this group, again, decentralization and tokenomics is where we're looking at how to develop this. And yeah, Parity from at least for now, really positive vibes and very professional team. And yeah, I'll kick it over to Žiga. I think it's a topic that for sure it deserves a little bit more than a minute of my ramble.
Yeah, I knew it was good. That's why I brought it up first, because I knew it's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, it all follows. So everything that Tomaž said is, I think it's a very nice fundamental to understand the following. OriginTrail has an adoption-based development. So nothing is planned and developed without the live interference from the market. And right now, and as we will be able to see later on, we're going to be talking about the value segments that we're dipping into. Everything that we have developed so far has been done together with a feedback from our partners. And also the future development plan, which now not only entails the sentiment and the feedback from the enterprise market, because what we eventually want to do here is to increase the adoption for the enterprise, and with the next generation internet also from the market with regards to the privacy and protection of the sensitive private data. So this is also entails individuals, but right now it's predominantly enterprise. This is on the one hand a very important feedback that we're getting from this bucket. And what is interesting about the feedback that we're getting is also that the value that this adoption is bringing in not only lies within the trusted data being exchanged. And OriginTrail originally was designed to allow for the exchanges of the trusted data in a structured manner, in a scalable manner, in a cost-effective manner. And all of this is kind of a quickly expanding niche in which Trail actually holds a monopoly. There is no other company, no other ecosystem that is building something similar to what OriginTrail is building. And this niche is really quickly expanding. What we have noticed, though, in the last few, or in the 2020 and also in the most part of the 2019, is that there is a lot of value that OriginTrail can deliver if we also tap into the consensus layer and see how we might improve OriginTrail consensus layer, which by definition is biased towards being developed in a more multi-chain manner, as Tomaž pointed out. But so far, because we always wanted to be very quick with the development, we have been relying on the existing ecosystem efforts, mostly the ones that are being delivered by the Ethereum ecosystem. And Ethereum ecosystem is by far the most advanced ecosystem. That said, we have seen several things that are not that positive, especially in the context of supply chains. which are requiring, certain different ways of how the things are being developed, and also the bias of the community has to go into a different direction than what we have seen with Ethereum, which is becoming kind of a casino ecosystem for casino almost with this DeFi, which is fine. But we feel right now that OriginTrail ecosystem has gained a unique DNA, which is more tailor-made for the enterprise adoption that we're pursuing. And the value creation from the enterprises now goes not only into the structure and the trust data exchanges, but also into certain things that a different consensus layer could offer. And since we're tapping into the consensus layer, we're also looking into how to retain the biggest portion of the value that is being brought in by the adoption from the side of the enterprises. And this is our goal. So it's not only to decrease or to optimize the gas prices, but actually to retain the value in our ecosystem, and the value that will be created after we hit a certain milestone is going to be several times bigger. And this is, all great for the OriginTrail ecosystem.
I do have to say, like, one of the big things for me with OriginTrail over the years have been the big selling points. I'm seeing a lot of that in Polkadot. So when people talk about supply chain, for example, and they talk about, does OriginTrail compete with VeChain or what TE Food? What they don't realize is it complements these projects, and we're seeing a lot of that in Polkadot. And I read an article recently where they said it best was Polkadot's not looking to dethrone the Goliath. They're looking to complement Ethereum and help it move forward. And so in that sense, between the ODN and Polkadot, you're seeing a lot of that same mentality. And I think it goes to show why the two are going to be so successful. Your OriginTrail's ODN's already been proving this enterprise adoption. Nobody's done that yet. Short of networks, swapping sushi or whatever it is, cards on a game or something. No one's had that level of enterprise adoption yet. And I think I can see from Parity side that why it would be good to try to mimic what's been done with the ODN, and it's been super successful.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, enterprise and supply chains and all the value segments that we're tapping into are way bigger than DeFi. I mean, DeFi has been a buzzword for the last few months, but if only people understood how big is the space that we're tapping into successfully, DeFi would be negligible.
right,
but it's it is way more different to build technologies that would allow mainstream market to adopt decentralized technologies, because it's a different mentality also in terms of the community that you foster, and the OriginTrail community. And we're lucky that we have people like you, Guinness, and we have several other peoples that are educating other newcomers, and it's all based on the hard facts, and it's all based on the technology. Technology is not that much on a hype, and this is highly influencing the way we develop products, and also highly helping us with the trajectory, which is the enterprise. And it's a tremendous market that we're seizing here.
great. Yeah, I mean, keep doing what you're doing. We don't need Origin sushi tokens. We just need you guys just keep building what you're building with data. I'm going to segue this one into this question, which is probably more for Branimir, but how would the Polkadot integration look like, and what would change for node operators? So, it's funny when you think about, I'm sure it's a scary thing thinking about adding a whole other layer in, but the ODN was agnostic to begin with. So how do you see integrating the Polkadot ecosystem into the ODN? Is it going to be a very gradual approach over a long period of time? Are we going to see some early effects early on from it? And from a node operator's perspective, what would it look like on our end? Is there anything that we'd have to do, or would we be like moving nodes over? Or if you could just give a big picture, or even go crazy on it. But what would this look like for all of us, you guys and us as a community?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in terms of how it will develop, obviously, there's going to be a lot more information coming out of the decentralization and tokenomics working group, because we will be working together directly with Parity on exactly not only how the technology should work, but also in terms of having the abilities of synchronizing the way the developments work together. So if you look at the Polkadot ecosystem at the moment, for example, one of the first, I believe, cross-chain transactions using the SMCP protocol that they use to connect parachains, I believe happened today, actually. So the ecosystem is moving forward, and obviously we have to sort of have that take that into account when working on development, and that's why it's going to be great to work together with them. So it's not really the OriginTrail ecosystem trying to sort of fit in, rather than both development tracks moving synergistically. And from the perspective of how that should work on a high level, from the get-go, OriginTrail was designed that it utilizes blockchain in the minimal fashion that it can. That's not to say that it's at the moment the minimum possible. You can always optimize and minimize, and that also depends on the chain itself. For example, one of the things that is interesting on Ethereum is that we're still going to be optimizing the smart contracts on that side, even though there's going to be developments for the agnostic components, which is to have these functionalities on Polkadot. But what really ends up happening here from a technical perspective is that it applies a principle of universality. So, for example, in terms of agnosticism as in the implementation of the consensus layer, it is to uniquely identify and specify, and that's something that we need to do. Specify the correct components or services delivered by different blockchain networks, so that you can deliver at least the minimum features needed by the protocol. When I say the minimum features needed, that might be the minimum in terms of being able to share information in the way that it's being done now, and potentially it might or might not contain features of a data marketplace, or might contain some other features. So that there will be some sort of set of core features. And at this moment in time, it doesn't look so that there's features that cannot be supported. But essentially, the idea is very similarly to Polkadot, which tries to be minimal and simple in general and robust, to take the consensus layer and, as a node of ODN, imagine you being a node, you essentially have have the ability to pick the realm, the chain that you want to utilize for consensus. And that can be a decision based on maybe current utilization, or maybe a decision based on preference, just pure preference. But the idea there would be that that different nodes on a self-running network like ODN don't need to persist anything specific on a specific chain. They can utilize it to perform some certain functionalities. For example, one of the interesting topics to look at here is the DID universal resolver built out by the DIF Foundation. And that's very similar to what the ODN is trying to do. Essentially is think of a universal resolver as a way of asking a question or posing a statement to be resolved, and then it gets resolved to a specific chain. And from the perspective of that service that's connected to the resolver, it abstracts all the other chains. So having that said, the idea there is that building the ODN to, at this point, have the ability to work with multiple chains in production is something that's going to be definitely one of the goals for the coming period. And how that works is both together with the team of Parity, but also with the community. So we will be publishing some interesting new requests for comments in the coming period that will contain also some interesting other aspects I didn't touch upon on this question. But essentially, the idea from the perspective of the node holder is that you as a node holder will be able to more actively participate in the development, have more capability in the node. And also what's important to note is that as an ecosystem being developed for usability and inclusiveness, the idea and agnosticism in terms of technical neutrality, the idea is that there should not be any sort of major decision imposed on how the functionality should be. So that be, for example, the price of the offers that your node is going to be considering or not for bidding. So that's something up to the user. The location of the node, what kind of operating system it should use. And one of these parameters is the blockchain. And potentially, for example, one of the things is how you would interact with such a blockchain. The node doesn't really specify this. The only thing that it connects to is a remote procedure call API. So something that can then further interact with the blockchain. So either that be run by Infura for you, or you running your own, let's say, Ethereum node, or maybe Polkadot node, that's being open. So, and ideally, we can sort of provide recipes on how these things can work together. But essentially, there's going to be more options, and there's going to be more robustness. And that's going to, I'm sure, prove to even build a more resilient and efficient system. That's the whole idea.
So is it safe to say that we could see some of the results early on? I just had a question from the Q&A section in the chat, basically just saying, we know you're working hard on the GATCH this year. Do you think we'll see a fix for 2020? Do you think we're going to see some of the results of this type of integration within this year still? Could we potentially see some gas prices coming down because of this? And you said we'll learn more. I know you can't say anything yet today, but generally speaking, is it something that we should see a benefit from in the shorter term?
Yeah, so definitely there's going to be developments that are going to be known quite soon. So in October, we expect to publish the first findings and decisions that have been happening within the working group of Trace Alliance for decentralization and tokenomics. And there's a part of that is going to be at least a tentative sort of way forward or timeline. Definitely in terms of development, on the software side, there's going to be tests being performed and potentially launched in the public in terms of potential public testnet. Ideally, that would be possible to happen even this year. So that's something that obviously we cannot promise, but it's a thing that would be really an optimistic and great goal to achieve, to actually do a proof of concept of how this works in the real wild, and the wild being anyone being able to run a testnet node. So that's the general idea. It's in terms of specific projections, it's always hard to make these when it comes to building out software, and it's just for really even well, common software for these novel protocols and decentralized technologies. It's even a degree harder. So yeah. I cannot really say anything more specific, but at least that's the aim. I can say that we're aiming for that.
The one thing that if I can add is that obviously it's a complex lift from making this happen, but there's been already significant efforts put into creating a framework that will make this complex journey, broken down into reasonable phases, and we are expecting to be able to speak about or publish this basically a roadmap towards that very soon. We're talking in the next couple of days that we'll have basically this update of roadmap, including these developments, which are obviously key to be addressed in the shortest time frame possible. So there's going to be a kind of like a blueprint as to how the phases are looking like in terms of tackling this an elephant. So what are the bites to go first?
So keep an eye out for that roadmap update. Then is what we want to tell the community. But before I leave the Polkadot stuff, I just want to ask this too. Is something I want to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but something I want to explain to people too is when you hear news like this, a lot of people tend to think like, oh, they're just building on Polkadot. Or, you know, if someone says, you know, we're partnered or we're doing a collaboration with a team, but it sounds like you guys are really collaborating with Parity in building technology together. This isn't just we're a project that we're gonna just utilize Polkadot. This sounds like this is a real collaboration between the two teams, with both have getting their hands dirty, elbows deep. I just want to make sure that's correct, right? So the community understands the gravity of the relationship.
Yeah, we first of all need to understand what's the gravity of what's the impact of this, and the value that's being created by, you know, reaching the crucial milestone here is delivering a value which is orders of magnitude bigger than what we have right now by only service income only. I mean, it's a huge effort and it's a huge impact. But, you know, bringing in the consensus layer in a way that, you know, we can support all the additional use cases is going to make a lot of difference. So we need to understand this is what's the gravity of this. And what you pointed out, Guinness, is also very important because it also is indicative of how we are going to be working on this issue. And you're correct, we're working very much closely with Parity. Not only Parity, also with the crucial people from the Web3 Foundation. So from all the pillars within the Polkadot, it's not only Parity. It's the Parity is the reason why we have connected with Parity is because they're also similar to what Trace Alliance has. We are both kind of following the value of usability. So whatever we develop, it has to be useful on the market as soon as possible. And Parity is a kind of a task force which tries to be very quick and very nimble, and they are actually the guys who sit there and they get the shit done. And we're quite similar in that respect, and that's why Parity and Trace Alliance / OriginTrail are working together. But that does not mean that other parts of the Polkadot ecosystem are not getting involved. We have people from Web3, as mentioned earlier. So it's the 360 support we can say that we get from the Polkadot ecosystem, and the modus operandi of us working on this. So it's not going to be kind of a digital impact. It's not going to be where we are right now, and then we're going to see heavens in I don't know at a certain point in time in the future. It's rather going to be more evolutionary. We're going to see positive impact already in this year. That said, we're going to be seeing more of a collaborative efforts on it. So it's not only going to be Trace Labs working on the issues in a centralized manner, but it's rather going to be us together with Polkadot in the working group, together with the OriginTrail community representatives within the working group, designing the roadmap and deciding on the roadmap crucial milestones, and then achieving certain advancements already in this year. But you know, the orders of magnitude improvement and orders of magnitude enhancement of the value will, of course, most probably be coming in the next year. But that does not mean that, you know, things are also not going to be significantly improved in this year already.
Awesome, exciting. I mean, it just the thought that, you know, you got, you know, eyes like Gavin Wood and Jutta Steinberg and all of them knowing what the ODN is today and stuff. So that's really cool stuff. And it just goes to show how the work you guys are doing is finally getting noticed. And speaking to the work that you guys are doing, I'm going to segue into this question because it's kind of something I thought about a little bit too. Is it time to do rebranding of OriginTrail? Not talking about changing the name or the logo, but the website with the tagline, making supply chains work together, may need to be changed. Since OriginTrail is so much more than just a supply chain project now, considering the data marketplace, NGI, oracles. And, you know, it's funny because it's kind of true in a way, right? So again, when I get back, I love getting back to this VChain and TE food and comparison everybody likes to do in their heads. They're like, oh, there's just another one of those. And there was an infographic somebody was sharing around recently. I don't know if you happen to see it on social media, but basically it listed like quant interoperability, OriginTrail does that. Oracles, Link, OriginTrail does that. So the technology is really covering so many different areas that are being built on in the space today. So it's almost kind of, you wonder if it's starting to do a disservice just saying, you know, making supply chains work together, because you guys are making everything work together, not just supply chains. So has there ever been anything, any thought as to kind of be changing how you really present yourself to the markets coming up soon, just so people get a better idea? They're not just tracking chicken, but, you know, connecting the world. Any thoughts on that? Just curious. Branimir laughing right now. It's in Tomaž.
Yeah, perhaps it's you know, our understanding of supply chains is a bit wider than a traditional understanding of supply chains. Supply chains do not kind of stop within the retail, and they also do not stop with the consumers. So with us as individuals, and that's why we're also putting a lot of focus on how consumers, actually all the way from 2011 when we developed the rudimentary system, it was the consumer. So the human centrism that we had in our kind of core modus operandi. So developing something that every person can use and every person can be impacted by. And this also falls into the domain of supply chains, according to our understanding. So it does not end, not even with the consumer, because we have, you know, circular supply chains. So supply chains are essentially everything. Every product that we interact with, we as an integral part of the supply chains. And in order to improve visibility in supply chains, in order to improve data integrity, in order to improve data protection of us as consumers, we need to be developing a solution that is still kind of OriginTrail is a middleware. So we're not developing kind of end-to-end solutions for each and every segment in supply chains and elsewhere. What we're developing is a middleware that is impactful in many aspects of our lives. And we did have, so we're not only struggling right now with the branding and rebranding, as you mentioned, people people seeing that we're way more than supply chain. So we did have problems in the past when so OriginTrail and the Trace Labs as a core developer, we did have a lot of kind of investment offers back in the days even before developing the decentralized OriginTrail. And people really struggle to understand that we're not only stopping within food supply chains, and that we also wanted to go beyond food supply chains. And when we went into the developing the open source protocol, some people were nodding their heads as to why the fuck are you doing this? Because, you know, you're doing so good in food supply chains. Why don't you keep on developing that cool app which, you know, has very nice visuals? You can trace milk, you can trace chicken, you know, but, you know, we saw that we can go so much further. And same goes now if we zoom out for the supply chains. We are augmenting the value of supply chains by also augmenting the way that we also understand the supply chains. And that's why we are still sticking to supply chains. Supply chains, even by traditional definition, are, you know, huge. They generate 2/3 of the world's GDP, which is some 70 trillion US dollars. And this essentially goes into every aspect of our lives. We're also going to look into the value segments that we're tapping into so that we understand what and which value segments besides traditional supply chains are being impacted by the solution. But we can touch upon that after we also touch the main dish question, because we saw that there's a question with regards to the main dish.
Well, I'm going to roll into that question right now. Perfect segue. My wingman here. So the main dish thing, it comes up all the time. When main dish, right? And now with everything you guys are doing, I don't even know what I could think the main dish would be anymore. Because again, it's data oracles, it's supply chain, it's SSI. I mean, so the mind can only, you know, guess at this point what main dish would be. So when is main dish? What is main dish? Should we be seeing hints of the main dish soon, or what is the main dish even covering? Any hints into the main dish?
So there are at least two aspects of the main dish. First one, obviously, it's a big thing, and perhaps and also part of this, it's perhaps not one single thing. It's multiple things. It's actually a barrage of things. And secondly, main dish, the same thing applies for the main dish as for any other thing in this space. There is no free lunch, although this is a main dish. So everyone that is going to be here with us, seeing and celebrating the main dish, has to go through a barrage of appetizers. So these appetizers and these development milestones in the adoption sense are important because they are all integral part of the so-called main dish. And we are going to see several exciting adoption things in the next weeks and months, and also next year, no doubt about it. But the main dish itself is going to involve all the, or most of the things that are going to be announced in the following in the future, in the near future. So perhaps stopping here with regards to the main dish, and perhaps Branimir, Tomaž can also add something. And in the meantime, I'll try to fix up the screen share for the things that we wanted to show in order to understand what's the scope and the size of what OriginTrail is targeting.
All right, yeah, great. Throw that up.
Well,
I know you're on the farm, so it could be a little slow getting that up there, but it's...
Yeah. So in order to understand what has been achieved so far and the value segments, because I know, and you were mentioning that people are saying that we might want to rebrand, and you know, we just want to establish a more holistic view of what we are doing at OriginTrail and what is the impact, what is the gravity of what we aim to achieve here. And the best way to understand that is to look into specific growth value segments and then try to holistically understand them, how they, you know, all fit together. And right now, as we see it, there are at least 4 value segments for the OriginTrail adoption. First of them is the assurance and compliance. And here, all of you must have heard about the British Standards Institution and the efforts that we have been investing towards improving the assurance and compliance, thus improving the resiliency of supply chains. And you have all read the white paper, which is giving you kind of a sneak peek into the solutions that we launched together with British Standards Institution, from which at least one of them is covering the most important importers into the US. So these solutions are falling into the assurance and compliance space. And if you have not yet applied for the webinar that we're having next Tuesday, please do apply. You're going to be hearing from the experts, from the leading experts, from BSI and also from Branimir on what's coming within that bucket, so assurance and compliance. And I can assure you that it's going to be very interesting, because the gravity of what's being done within that vertical is really important. You saw the scan application, the scan trusted factory, and the overall potential of the companies involved therein. 1.2 trillion USD per year of the overall revenue that those companies are generating, and much more. So tune in for that webinar. So looking specifically at the assurance and compliance, you can see that the potential there is enormous. It almost amounts to 50 billion USD by 2023, which is, you know, the overall assurance and compliance market. And this is where OriginTrail, together with the partners, is targeting to achieve and to seize part of that value. Of course, this is the overall market, and we must understand that the partners we work with are already domain experts, and that they are also part of this market. And OriginTrail is a middleware we believe can significantly enhance their offering and partake in this total market size. Then looking forward into supply chains, and as you see, kind of the second vertical here, supply chains with comparison with assurance and compliance, it's not something that is clearly clearly distinguished from all the rest of the verticals. For the sake of easier understanding, we just wanted to kind of present what's the market potential for the decentralized applications for supply chain segments, as understood, you know, by traditional experts. So not by OriginTrail understanding of an augmented and the overall supply chain potential, but just kind of the strictly and traditionally understood supply chain total market size. And this amounts to just above 20 billion. And going forward to next generation internet, and what you can see here is that only in European Union, the total market size of this segment is going to surpass 1 trillion by 2022. So this is just Europe, but of course we're not only focusing on Europe. And now again, going back to supply chains, we do consider next generation internet to be very, very important segment for this, because again, we as consumers need to be protecting our sensitive data, and at the same time, as we start using all the smart appliances that are going to tell us which products we need, they're actually going to be learning on us, learning on our data. We should make sure that we as consumers become part of this next generation internet and the data economy that not only big brands are going to be benefiting from, so the big brands that are part of the global supply chains, but also we as the consumers. And again, this is an enormous market potential only from the data value aspect. And in the next few years, European Union is also going to be investing some 6 to 8 billion into this space. And as you have been able to witness recently, OriginTrail and more specifically Trace Labs as a core builder for OriginTrail has been admitted into several programs financed by the European Commission. So this is the beginning of what we're going to see as a massive investment from the European Union into this space. And next generation internet like NGI DAPC, NGI Atlantic, NGI Ledger, and some other smallers are already becoming an integral part of the OriginTrail. And then last but not least is something that we have been developing for months now, is a suite of solutions that are able to support other service provider, other systems integrators that are part of either Oracle networks or IBM or SAP systems integrator. And this is based again on the middleware logic, and again based on the premise that we need to improve interoperability between the existing enterprise systems. Now, with the distinction with all the three verticals that we looked into before, the system integrator partner networks part of the market, or the service provider part of the market, are going to be catered to by through these solutions that are going to be capable of automating the adoption of the OriginTrail decentralized network. So far, Trace Labs has been the agent for the adoption of the OriginTrail decentralized market, whereas in the future, we are going to be allowing other service providers to more quickly onboard other companies. And OriginTrail and Trace Labs is still going to be, most probably for the foreseeable future, the main agent for the adoption. But the main kind of parabolic adoption for the OriginTrail is going to be happening once we have tools that are going to be used by the systems integrators. And this does not mean, of course, that we are not going to be developing additional verticals, although even right now we're speaking about changing the name for the OriginTrail, changing the branding to encompass not only supply chains. But this is kind of the growth value segments that you see are really significant. They are huge, and the path forward goes through still carrying on and taking aboard several projects. And right now we have several dozens of projects that we are making sure are going to be running on the OriginTrail decentralized network. Some of them are already onboarded, but the main adoption in the future we see is going to be coming from the tools that will be capable of allowing system integrators and service providers to onboard their clients. So this is, I believe it at least gives you some understanding of how important this market is. So DeFi is sexy. DeFi is really exciting. You can lose a lot of money, but the this enterprise sector is also very, very interesting.
And I say it all the time to people too. Is it's not always the sexy stuff that's that gets the front seat, the limelight. But I mean, the BSI stuff, the next generation, like, it doesn't seem glamorous, these EU projects, but the longevity it means for the project is awesome. It's crazy because it shows real adoption versus these fly by night things where they're auctioning off a Tesla on Twitter or something. It's silly because there's no long-term sustainability in that. And even just even the BSI stuff alone, right? So we think of this main dish and all these pieces come together, all these different markets. The BSI stuff alone just seems so massive. And then I follow them on LinkedIn, and every day lately they keep talking about, listen to Branimir and us talk about aerospace and healthcare. And I'm like, I haven't even heard you guys talk about aerospace and healthcare yet. Never. So it's crazy to me that these things that go under the radar for some people in the community, I'm like, of course I'm going to listen to that. I haven't even heard the OriginTrail being used in that sense yet. So it's very exciting seeing the enterprise adoption coming to play. And speaking to that, I'm going to go to my question. I always got to get one of my questions in there, but it kind of relates to this a little bit. Is with the upcoming webinar with GS1, everything in OriginTrail. I'm very excited about this. Again, I tend to be one of those people that takes the non-glamorous stuff but can understand the potential of it and get very excited over it. And I try to get other people excited about it in the community and try to explain why. Like, this webinar seems massive. This webinar seems like it's a real catalyst for everything that's been happening. I created this term called the Holy Trinity of supply chains with GS1, everything, and OriginTrail, where GS1's has the standards, and DOM and everything over there, the kings of the digital link, and obviously the OriginTrail is the network this is all going to reside on. So can you talk about what we might see after this webinar come from the three coming together, that Holy Trinity? Are we going to see a lot more stuff popping up between GS1, everything, and ODN that really makes it clear to everything that's been being built and worked on in the background for these last couple of years? I don't know if anybody wants to take that one.
Yeah, all right. Žiga, I guess, was speaking a lot, so we'll give him a break. And he was screen sharing on a bad connection, so that's
that's true.
Pluses. I guess
I'm amazed he's still on the stream right now after that. But
yeah. I mean, I share your enthusiasm, to be honest. I just also seeing some of the things and the discussions behind the scenes, obviously, can make you even more excited about it. But it's definitely something that you have. I believe the people you want to have on the panel when you're discussing just industry data standards and how we see the future of industry data be connected, utilized in interoperable way, period, right? So there's really not much further you can go than having, the likes of Phil Archer, the leader of Digital Link on GS1 Global, and you have Gina there, you have Branimir, you have Dom. I mean, obviously, anything from designing a standard and how you put it in practice to how to connect it to a integrity layer repository like ODN is, we'll have on that panel. And it's just a discussion, an event that's obviously very, very exciting to visit. And I don't think we've mentioned yet or no, but we've filled up all the initial places that were available. So there is demand obviously for that. We've expanded now that in the meantime, so there's still going to be a chance, but for anyone that still hasn't signed up for this, I definitely welcome you to do so, because the discussion there is, well, that's that. Like, if you want to figure out how these things are going to play out in the future, that's where it's going to happen. But it's to your point on kind of closer collaborations, we do see, as far as we can say, it's a very good energy as well in terms of how the understanding of what's happening at the moment there's a very nice overlap in how, and I won't put words into people's mouth. Let's see on the on the webinar itself. But guess is that there's going to this alignment is going to show, and hopefully even leads to some more exciting stuff that can get you know, touched upon on the webinar or in the days, the weeks after that. And that, but yeah, the short answer, I'd say that I'm with you on the enthusiasm. I'm with you on really excited to see this happen.
Well, it's funny. I don't think a lot of people understand just how big everything's reach is as a company. And so the fact that you guys are working so closely with them is amazing. I mean, they have customers like Coke and Puma and Ralph Lauren. And, you know, you talk about the people only they want to see the glamorous stuff, the sexy stuff in the spotlight. But I mean, everything's working with some really big partners, and it'd be a really good niche for you guys, for your technology to be in there with them. So I'm excited about it. I can't wait. Do you know if it's going to be recorded? If anybody, in case people don't see it? Okay, perfect. Good. Because I know someone's going to ask me that. So, our favorite topic is exchanges, but is it worth considering getting a decent market maker on exchanges? All major projects have market makers that provide liquidity upside and downside also, so that when someone tries to sell their TRAC due to the liquidity, we won't be losing 20% each time. So I will say that I was impressed the other day that TRAC hit over 2 million in volume in one day. And I think that's the first time I've ever seen that since at least early 2018. And so that's impressive. And that's only on KuCoin and Uniswap and Bittrex Global. I mean, that's mind blowing. But have you guys thought about the market maker aspect? I mean, do you have anybody trying to get in from a business sense, and just the liquidity is not there to do so? Or do you see a need to grow the liquidity now that everything is becoming so big? I mean, OriginTrail is almost in the top 100 now. Like, it's getting close. It gets very close, and then it goes back and gets close. So once that happens, I imagine the need for more liquidity will pop up. So if you can speak to that in any way, I'm sure some people in the community would like to hear.
Yeah, I think definitely our approach has always been and continues to be is focused on adoption in terms of how this can really support what's the business requirement behind it. So whatever is on the market itself, that's the primary, let's say, focus always, right? And through that lens, obviously it's great to see that there's an excitement also from that kind of secondary market activity, and that we are seeing more people get in, higher volumes being achieved. Obviously, that's all very, very positive signs. And in a way also kind of showing that certain barriers are being reached in terms of how much kind of the current setup can support. And from that aspect, obviously, we're actively looking as to how to support better the efforts, and then the kind of also taking into account that, you know, not all community members are able to use certain exchanges, and that kind of be able to accustom more wider reach in that sense. So all of these things are obviously on our minds as well, and kind of looking as to what's the best way to approach it. But I do have to put in the same kind of thinking that's always present there. It's our focus is always long term, right? And this exchange game is always very tricky to get in. I feel that right now it's a good, and you know, from all the things that you've mentioned, I feel that there's certain now not patterns, but just like performances that we're seeing over the course of the last weeks and months that might be an interesting signal to also some of the other players in this sphere. And hopefully that will lead to some more positive discussions around that. But going back to my previous thing, is like the long-term focus is the one that we're taking. If we see that there's a good spot and it makes sense and that it doesn't jeopardize in any way, you know, either the project itself, then we're happy to engage in that. And I guess that's as far as we could go. Obviously, no announcements or no anything like that can ever be made without having that reach a certain maturity phase where it has certain certainty. And as that will happen, we'll be happy to communicate that as well. But in terms of the priorities, I'd say that it's a better setup is forming with these last performances that we're seeing, and also the need kind of to expand on what's currently available, I guess, is becoming more and more apparent. So definitely something that I hope I was able to answer as much as I could.
Yeah, and I think you said it yourself, as the network grows, there's obviously got to be more ways for community members around the world to contribute to get the tokens in order to run nodes and help expand the network. And I'm actually going to segue into this question because it's kind of related. This is more for you, Branimir, too. For the purpose of forward planning and node creation, will there be changes required for minimum TRAC? And so it's funny because it originally was 1,000 TRAC, and TRAC token was worth 0.007 cents. So then moves up to 3,000 TRAC in order for security purposes in the network, and then TRAC shot up in price. So now, are we starting to get to that point where we feel like we might be pricing people out of running a node? And if that's the case, will there be adjustments to go back down again? I remember at one point it was said that the idea was over time the ODN might adjust that limit based on like a dynamically as the price fluctuates, but is that something that's going to be in place soon? I mean, I guess people are just worried that it might end up costing them like $5,000 to run a node soon. I mean, that's a good problem to have if you're holding the token, but I mean, but in general, it probably would price a lot of people out from really helping decentralize the network. So is there plans to see that go up and down more than it is now?
Yeah, that's one of the topics that's also going to be up for discussion within the Trace Alliance working group that we mentioned. In terms of just going back to why it exists in the first place, is that many times within networks such as the ODN, where you have permissionless environments, so anyone can join in, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which are different types of networks per se, but you always need some sort of mechanism to prevent, in the widest sense of the term, spam. So spamming the network with a lot of transactions or just messages within the network layer. And one of the ways to stop that is to actually, either, for example, in Bitcoin, do a requirement on proof of work, so that if you want to send a transaction, you have to pay a transaction fee. So you cannot send 1 million transactions. Well, you can, but you have to spend a lot of.
It would be cost prohibitive. Yeah.
Exactly. So the idea there is to find some sort of a way to limit such a problem, because it's essentially hard to solve on a technical level. You have to sort of move that problem and potentially use technical tools, but in the end you have to create that it's hard to create an environment that is hard to basically attack the network with spam. And that's why the initial stake in participating into the ODN essentially limits the possibility that anyone can create thousands of nodes, which is a common problem within DHT networks, for example. And ODN is, as part of its network layer, contains a DHT. And essentially, there's one key problem there, which basically you can do something called a Sybil attack. So you can generate multiple identities, and that's maybe within, the number is between thousands and hundreds of thousands of identities. You overflow the network, you basically, a network that counts on a certain distribution of these identities for its operation has a problem there. So having that said, the specific number will definitely have to be variable through time, and the factors which have to make it variable are going to be the cost, obviously. So if it costs $1 million to run a node, then it doesn't make sense because you lose the permissionless aspect of it. So that means only people with $1 million have a permission to join. So therefore, it has to be dynamic in that regard. It also has to be dynamic in the regard of how many, that it doesn't prohibit the growth in terms of if the network grows large enough that you have such an amount of tokens needed so that you use up most of the tokens and you don't have enough for the actual system operation layer. So in that sense, there's a couple of things that are being calculated within the smart contracts at this point in time that are, for example, the difficulty aspect when you're publishing an offer that actually calculates according to the number of participants in the network. And that's in the future something that we intend to propose as a solution regarding the amount of stake needed as well. So in those terms, if the token continues appreciating, that there is a mechanism where as a community we can change this parameter to a certain more sensible number, let's say, in the future. But it's not going to be done on the basis of just having the discussions within Trace Labs as the core developers only. So it's going to be part of something we'll be working on together with the rest of the working group.
Well, it kind of segues into this. You guys are really good at segueing questions today, because it kind of goes into this other one, and I'm just going to read it now because it kind of speaks to this. Is, will there be a DAO represented by community members for OT in the future? And so it'd be great having, you know, the decentralization group being able to decide with multiple parties from around the world, different organizations and people and backgrounds to decide what this should look like, I would think, rather than just have a computer algorithm run and say, oh, TRAC is 75 cents, so today it's going to be this. You can really have those discussions. So will there be a DAO represented by community members for the OT in the future? So will Trace Labs extend to members of the community in that sense and so on?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Branimir said if the token appreciates. He meant
yeah.
appreciates.
Who brought Mr. Negativity over here, huh? No.
It's not a financial advice.
Yeah.
There you go. No, on the serious note, yeah, I mean the intention of having this type of decisions be more inclusive is obviously there. So starting with the even with decentralization and tokenomics group, right? So it's how to bring relevant actors in, stakeholders in, where these type of decisions aren't unilaterally made. Now, this being either some sort of this type of a roadmap, or is this a decision on what should be the size of the stake? I guess the fairest answer is that we'll look at different possibilities and then see which really makes the most sense for the particular time. But obviously, it's stated in the first line of the white paper that OriginTrail is an ecosystem. So even by that very definition, it's not something that can either be that should be then kind of governed, or made the decision should be made by a single person. So yeah, but if there is a neat way to handle it in an automated way with a smart contract, which like the discussions around what Branimir was saying definitely alludes to, that there might be a good way to have this be solved without the need to constantly kind of have these discussions over and over and again, but have it a particular algorithm solve that for as long as it makes sense, and then change it if it doesn't anymore. Then this should be, I guess, a good enough approach to tackle that challenge.
Right, like a decentralized solution group gets together and says what the algorithm should look like, and then the algorithm does its thing. So it's twofold.
So
yeah, I mean, from our perspective here, we're always looking for ways how we can involve more people, so that, you know, in the future, it's in 10 years of time, it's not only going to be the group from the Trace Labs that is making all the calls and responding to all the questions. Of course, we want automation, because with the DAO-like solutions and organizations, it's all about automating and decentralizing at the same time. But first and foremost, it's about automation. And we know that automation, when considered in a maximalist terms, cannot always yield the best results. And the best results are by rule always delivered by hybrid approaches. And so kind of the automation plus some human involvement. And since OriginTrail is not only involving the community coming from the kind of the blockchain or public permissionless blockchain side, we're also involving enterprises. And because of the nature of the OriginTrail, we also need to involve organizations which are represented by people. So it's never, or for the foreseeable future, not going to be a DAO-like organization, but we're rather going to have a more hybrid approach. And that's why Trace Alliance in the following months is also going to be admitting new members. Some very important companies joining Trace Alliance in the following months. And the main aim here is to ensure a proper global representation also by, you know, bigger organizations which are still run by people. And these people need to have not the final word, but at least they need to have a say, to a same extent that, you know, you guys in the community will be able to partake in the Trace Alliance in at least one of the working groups, which is the most influential for how the nodes are being run, etc. So it's a hybrid approach, but so far this hybrid approach has been providing the best value for all of us.
Awesome. And yeah, this kind of goes into the question here as well. Will there be more data contribution projects similar to the Trusted Essentials repository in the future? So talking about getting the community involved. And so are we going to see more projects like that popping up? That one's ready to kick off now. So what's the idea behind any sort of more of those type events?
This is a very important project because it's going to show that we can use a global repository, a decentralized knowledge graph for multiple use cases within supply chains, within the procurement of essential equipment, not only for COVID-19 diseases, but for any scenario in the future potentially. And as we have seen, you know, companies and countries and big organizations are not nimble enough, so that when there's a crisis, there is an inherent need for such a global repository. And this global repository, we're happy that last week we have gotten some very good news that one of the very, you know, global organizations has endorsed the repository, and we're going to be talking about this more in the following week. The announcement is going to be made, at least we were told so. So by having this positive example already at the offset of this campaign, so we have I think close to 20 participants that are going to be kind of creating a living organism within this first project for the you know, crowdsourcing of the data. Already at this stage, the project has been endorsed by an important organization. So more about this the next week. And because of this positive example, we're sure that you know, such projects are going to be kind of an every month exercise for the OriginTrail ecosystem.
Exciting.
Also from the focus, just growing the knowledge graph, right? So that's one of the ways of how we can make this happen. So it's very exciting for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody's super excited, especially the COVID thing hits home to a lot of people now. So I think everybody's excited to see what comes of that, and you know, where that can even go to at some point. So can you give us a glimpse of different possibilities that can come out of the open PKG decentralized identity you know, solution? So how would that be used? And I saw a screenshot, and I didn't know if it was for marketing purposes only or not, but basically you show a phone where someone could put their information in and kind of submit it, looks like, you know, to the ODN or something. But how do you envision this being used? I mean, will we see this on websites you know, pop up in the enterprise, like instead of log in with Facebook, log in with, you know, open PKG? And if so, have you seen some interest in it? Like, has anybody been like, hey, this sounds really cool, could you show us how this works? I mean, this we'd like to implement this in, you know, our solution. So if you could talk just a little bit about where you see the direction of that going.
Yeah. Ron, you want to take it? Or?
Yeah, so from the perspective of open PKG as the application, it's really being an implementation of already existing reference architectures that are being built out. So it's an implementation utilizing the ODN of actually several different upcoming architectures that have their root basically in the European SSI framework. And essentially it's a self-sovereign identity framework that, well, I mentioned European because there's a European sort of SSI lab that's promoting it, but essentially it's a global framework. The idea of why Europe really stood behind it, and what's really cool about it is that self-sovereign identity is the idea that you are the actual controller of your identity. Controller is a very sort of interesting concept because it touches upon the GDPR regulation, where there's something called a data controller specified, which is really, if you sort of numb it down, comes to, well, who is basically the one managing and storing information about you or data about you. So, for example, when you go to a website and it asks you to log in and it provides you a couple of these options like using your email or Facebook or Google, what they actually help you is, what they get from you is sort of a way to identify you and then somehow attach all the information that they might be tracking on you or what you're doing on a website to it. The problem today with that is not only that this can be sort of observed from a surveillance perspective, and it's obviously a bad thing if you're able to aggregate a lot of information about a lot of individuals in one place. Cambridge Analytica-like problems can occur. But on the other hand, what the problems for companies that are actually looking to sort of protect themselves from that. So to not have their technology be the breeding ground for new Cambridge Analyticas, these companies are actually in need of solutions that are going to help them to do all of this in an easy way. And the best possible way is to go all the way transparent towards the user, so that the user actually is able to exercise his rights. And for example, the rights in Europe specifically allow you to do something which is basically make a request to see what's being done with your data and where it's being stored. And legally, the company needs to respond to this request. And somehow, not somehow, but really, it turns out that it's not that easy to do this. So data has a tendency to get copied in places, and you don't particularly observe data from the perspective of provenance. So more like you try to use it, but if you have a good tool that's going to help you map out how you used it and how it's been moving along your systems, much like the often mentioned chicken, you can also track data. So you can essentially use the OpenPKG as an implementation for this. And specifically, this is going to allow the user to make these requests for data be automated. So the companies don't need to take a manual effort of a couple of people, usually technically capable people, which tend to be scarce as well, and spend a lot of time actually to map out what's going on with the data, prepare a report, give you this report, and then when you request deletion, then you have to go and delete all this, rather than you would be able to, let's say, come to a website, and when you accept all the cookies or whatever cookies you want to accept, you might sign this acceptance with a key, which is associated to your self-sovereign identity. So let's say that might be an Ethereum wallet, or it might be a wallet of some other blockchain, which contains a key, or you can not even use a blockchain. You can use the traditional public key infrastructure. But essentially, when you sign with a key assigned to your digital identity, which has a digital identifier, decentralized identifier assigned to it, that means you can issue your identity yourself, sign this message, and then from that moment on, you're able to verify the same request later with the same public key. So that essentially you can, using the ODN, have the permission to access the data stored within the node of that particular organization. You can see what's been done, because if implemented correctly, it will track the utilization of the data, and you can actually request deletion. And all of this will have its cryptographically verifiable trail available as any piece of information is already available in the same sense as in the ODN. So the idea here is to not build something completely new. We're purposing the technology that's already there to be utilized within the frameworks that are emerging. And these are the self-sovereign identity framework, decentralized identifiers, and that ties really well into the verifiable credentials aspect of the ODN, where some of that could be seen within the BSI implementations, where they issue attestations, be that company factory audits or certificates. And the idea there is that all these audits are issued by someone, right? Someone who has an identity. And ideally, we all get to control all our identities. So that might be a consumer, or it might be a company, any entity that's able to exercise the rights that are slowly but steadily being adopted around the world. I've also seen in the US, there's quite some movement in that direction as well.
In California, yeah, California, you can't even put devices out with like a default username and password now. And I think so it's kind of deriving from, like, the GDPR stance. And where I think this is amazing, so being a guy in IT for a long time, like managing an email system, for example, I'm required by law to keep records for 7 years of employees after they leave. Well, when they do leave, how do they know that I actually got rid of that data after 7 years? I mean, and I think that having this automated GDPR system is going to allow that. We're saying, hey, after 7 years, this data is gone, and it is, because there's no human intervention that's required in order to make that happen. And I think that's I could see everything using this at some point. It only makes sense, and it's going to protect companies, because then they may have some upfront costs in order to use the network, but at the same time, they're circumventing any lawsuits down the road that might pop up because the data leaked out of their system, or they didn't get rid of it properly. So I mean, it sounds like a really huge use case, and once it really gains adoption. So yeah, I'm excited about that, and I think the whole
have costs even now, just with the handling the responses, right? Because in Europe, the fines are really hefty. Like if you do not respond in time, or if you have and you didn't respond fully, or things like that, you can really, it can be a problem for the company. So a lot of the companies that can't afford it actually get outside help and also BSI is one of the companies offering these type of services, where they help really to optimize the way kind of these data subject access rights are and responses are handled. So it's a very, very persistent problem still. So it's something that, and where it can be made in a way that it's not super, it's not complex to implement, right? So that's why it has very nice potential to then be that kind of one of the killer apps for ODN as well, because it's just it's very usable, and it's very kind of in a way almost transactional in the way it gets implemented. So that's why it's very sexy.
Well, and speaking even what Branimir was saying before about the provenance idea, so what a lot of people don't understand too is they're saying, well, what prevents somebody from just copying the data and then using it? Well, if you can't prove that it's the real data, because you can't link it back on the ODN, then how does it even have value at that point? So there's going to come a point where these organizations have to see where it came from in order to consider it real data, I would think. And so that's going to be the huge win, where it's going to be all or nothing. Like everybody's, at some point, you're going to have to know where that data came from. I just believe that. And I know you guys, of course, do, because that's why you're building this. And so at some point, like, I'm not trusting data that didn't come from a network where I can't trace it back through this knowledge graph, for example. But it's super exciting stuff. And speaking, another project, but could you please share some insights on the data marketplace? Why should we be excited about this? What does it mean for node runners? How does it complement digital twin and supply chain use cases? I mean, again, the data marketplace is kind of the same idea as the open PKG, right? Like I'm supplying some data, and I can prove that it's real data, and I can show the history of the data. But so, do you have any insights on the NGI data marketplace, like how it fits in, how it would be used, and what? And I saw some examples of water samples and lab samples, but should we be seeing some results of this soon too, and it will become more clear how the data marketplace is really going to be used?
Yeah, I mean, it's the data marketplace it's an extension. It's an integral part of basically how you treat or how you utilize the ODN. Just because in valorizing the data is the next step after kind of, there are certain use cases where you're sharing the data because you're either getting data back, or there's a business arrangement where this type of trusted data exchanges make sense, or there's requirement for, let's say, anti-counterfeit protection or something like that. But then there's also a lot of use cases where people make an effort to create valuable data, but then kind of there's a need to valorize it and somehow be able to sell it. And in the cases that you mentioned, like laboratory data, it's also of the utmost importance that if some laboratory in in California is performing a test, and they are looking at a reference test that they purchased, that they also know that this reference test came from a certain laboratory in Europe, that it was signed by them, that when it was made and it hasn't changed in between, because they, at the end of the day, are vouching that towards their clients. And so it's a very apparent of why this type of there's a requirement for something like that. But it extends to literally anything. So that's what industrial data marketplaces. Of course, it will start with some of the things, but then it will become more and more, it will make more and more sense to kind of go towards just valorizing, putting a price on the data, and then having that kind of transactions or be done over a marketplace and get compensated for the data that you capture that's valuable for someone else. Just in a very similar way that today we're thinking about products. It's just going to be, it's going to be either an extension of the product, it's an integral part of the product, it's going to become a kind of the two things together, or it's going to become another product, which is you're going to be selling. So the kind of putting this data is the new oil, not only within a single organization, but rather in a cross-organizational setting requires that type of data marketplace. And we've just tapped a couple of now that we're showcasing of how this functions in and creating the foundational technology to support this type of exchanges. But the application is then it really opens up.
Awesome. And
and we will be hearing more about it. Yeah, of course. So the laboratory data marketplace is going to get some, you'll be hearing more about it over the course of the next weeks. There's also going to be some, so there's going to be a little bit more information also available about some of the other projects that we're a part of already, which are also taking this technology and putting it to action. So there's quite a few more things to be communicated around data marketplace.
Yeah, and the NGI Atlantic. So NGI Atlantic is a nice example because it is an interplay between the human-centrist approach / data protection, so the personal data protection, decentralized identities, and data monetization. So we have all the aspects covered. And the beautiful thing about the data, about the NGI Atlantic program is that we can actually take the results from the NGI ledger, and NGI ledger showed how to deploy data monetization through data marketplace in the food supply chains, and take those results and deploy them on the both sides of the Atlantic. So we're now receiving partner requests, and in the following weeks and months, we believe that we are going to be seeing some very exciting names attached on the NGI Atlantic project on both sides of the Atlantic. So that's going to be very, very interesting. And the good thing about the NGI Atlantic and also about the data marketplace that we developed is that for the first time we were able to show that one of the open call winners, OriginTrail open call winners, is now basically showing the value of both their application and hardware, so the Kakasi device, and pair that with the OriginTrail decentralized network. So it's kind of a double win for what we have been doing so far, and that's a huge, I believe, success. So we need to understand that 1 in 10 projects actually are successful statistically. So we believe that's a huge success also for the open call that we organized in the past.
Yeah, and this stuff's super, from an IT geek, this stuff's super exciting to me. I feel like I'm taking place in like the next ARPANET trial, like saying like I was part of the original internet. Like I feel like just even having a node and being part of this data marketplace system and OpenPD, I'm going to be, hey, I was one of the OGs for internet 3.0,
Yeah, it would really be interesting, and I believe we touched this point a while ago last year when we talked about Kakasi, the Guinness, and I believe it was me and Tomaž. So if there is still case at the school that you're building for Kakasi and data marketplace, so this thing can be very applicable for multiple use cases. So where we are currently as an industry, we're trying to structure data. So we need to understand that we are beyond state of the art with OriginTrail and with its technologies that we're building, whereas the world is still at the structured data phase. So the data is still not structured. what is next is we need to append integrity to the data that we successfully structured. And by the way, data across the board is still not successfully structured. That's why, you know, all the blockchain solutions are still garbage in, garbage out. And when we transition to the, you know, when we append integrity to the data, only then we can talk about, you know, monetizing that data. And we're in some ways, we're 2 steps ahead of the entire industry. So once we get all the things right, and once we, you know, convince the world, and once we show them that not only it makes sense to make to get integrity, but also to monetize it, then, you know, it's going to be really a fun business. And by all means, if you're still developing the, when you're finalized with developing the school project, I hear that's a very exciting project. We can also see how data marketplace can be used within that scenario.
Yeah, and if people are wondering what he was talking about, I'm part of where I'm working right now. I'm a network manager, and we're building a new school. And I talked with the team originally, and they're putting this futuristic aquaponics lab into our school system. So students are going to be able to actually, you know, run this fully autonomous, you know, aquaponics lab. And I thought, how cool would that be to get Kakaxi sensors involved, where maybe taking, you know, anything from heat to moisture levels, and then putting that on the ODN, and then it gives an opportunity to see what you can do with that data. I mean, it might be valuable data for some other company or laboratory around the world that does want to know, hey, you know, what were the conditions where this was grown? And it shows that provenance, because this isn't data that can be faked. This is data that's coming from an IoT sensor that's grabbing this data real time and uploading this to the network. So it's, you're getting rid of that garbage in example, because there's no room for human error in there when putting that data onto the ODN. And so I thought it'd be a really cool use case for it. So once this project gets to a point, I'm hoping we can circle back on that, maybe get a few of those sensors in there and show people how this next generation internet will work.
Definitely. I mean, again, shout out to Kakaxi, the team out of San Francisco. So it's not only this example, it's also that the clients we are getting requests on a monthly basis, at least, on where to, you know, deploy additional Kakaxi devices. So these guys are really doing a great job. We initially met them in Milan back in 2016 or 15. And you know, they have always been aligned with the same principles as we are, and we are already seeing, so by ourselves, we're already seeing the results of their work.
That's awesome. I can't wait. We're all excited to see more of that stuff get put on the ODN. And you know, it's getting late, but I'm going to ask one more question. This is more of a fun one for you guys. Okay, just take your founders' hats off for a second. All right, just put yourself in just strictly talking about the technology and strictly talking about maybe being like a node runner, or with everything that you've talked about and the use cases coming out for the network. What would jobs look like over the next few years, right? I mean, will we one day be looking at 10,000 jobs in the network per, I don't know, month, hundreds of thousands? I mean, how big do you see the ODN getting, and do you envision that this is going to be a global network by 2023, 2025 that just has constant flow of jobs constantly going through the network at all times? I mean, and a job could even be 18 decimals below what a TRAC value is. I mean, because it's just getting that much use. So where do you see it? Do we see one day where we just see jobs cranking left and right and a constant flow of data on the network? Not financial advice. This is just off the record opinions.
Looking at the projections, the overall market size, the overall potential, the plan for the improvements of the OriginTrail technologies, by 2023, we believe that you know, 10,000, something between 10,000 jobs and 100,000 jobs is completely doable. I would even say that in many ways, you know, where we will have been lagging behind if we only have 10,000 jobs on a daily basis. So 2023, I mean, by expectations, we believe that it is closer to 100,000. But the way jobs are going to be structured, what will be the compensation structure for the jobs is most likely be slightly different. But definitely, we expect high volumes of usage for the ODN by that time.
Awesome. Yeah, he said daily. I just saw from Ned Allen is that daily jobs. We were kind of talking about daily jobs, yeah, in the grand scheme of things. Branimir
The
might have
thing
had something.
here, yeah, the thing here to just kind of have in mind is that data is growing exponentially all over. So there's so many more devices every year connected to the global network, and it's hard to even envision like devices that are not connected. That's why we talk about the Internet of Things, and for a decade almost already. And the thing there is that at some point it's going to be, if you think of data as the raw material, you want to use the raw material to build something like a bike or a car. You're going to use a bunch of raw materials connected together to get a product out of it. And that's where you transition from data towards information and knowledge. And that's why it's really important to start thinking about this data from the get-go as something that is synergistic rather than just, kilograms of data, or like in, I don't know, in the US, pounds of data. But the point there being is that it's going to be useful to connect a lot of this new data. And in order to do that, you need some sort of mechanism that functions efficiently and efficiently in between parties, not just in a localized way and
Right.
or a centralized way. So for these things, you need to incentivize the parties to work together. And that's why the incentivization and the tokenization really helps there a lot. We also need to make it so that it works in a market-based environment, so that it's not, some sort of a arbitrary made decision on how much what costs, so that actually the services can be chosen upon some sort of a protocol. And then finally, that it's very easy to connect this information and to verify it. Because if you don't want to connect something to some, like Žiga said, garbage to some useful information. So that's why it's also complex, but all of these are being addressed by the design of the protocol, the OriginTrail protocol. And therefore, if you look at, we strongly believe, with our founders' hats on or off, that there's going to be a system like that in the future. Maybe someone builds something better than the OriginTrail in the future, who knows? I'd like to see that, but at this point in time, I don't see anyone really moving in that direction. So people are shooting for example, scalability in the blockchain space, and that's a huge problem. And that's exactly why certain teams like Parity, for example, should focus on that, because we need to solve that in order to be utilizing the necessary consensus-based protocols that we need for things like the ODN. And then that's why us, as someone who is focused on knowledge graph, need to focus on this aspect. But having that said, there's going to be a huge inflow of data because it's growing. It's up to us to make worth of it, of these raw materials, and somehow make it really easy to utilize in an environment between different companies, not just within one. So that's why it's a really important focus from the get-go to observe it as linked data, and also to look at standards. So we always try to emphasize this importance. Whoever is not going to be looking at how people agree on describing something or protocolizing some sort of activity between parties, that's not going to be the thing that wins in the end. You know, the things that have been winning, at least in the technological world for the past decades, have been things like GS1. So you see barcodes all over. You don't see, I don't know, drawings of Bambis or something. It's really barcodes. These guys have made it. You see HTTP protocols, open protocols, really, that have been open sourced and collaborative in the nature. And that's why when you look at these specific linked data protocols that revolve a lot around identity, that's something that's going to have to be built as infrastructure. And we believe that the ODN is going to be the infrastructure for that in the future. So.
And it needs to be incentivized, because without incentivization, how do you have true decentralization?
Exactly. And I mean, someone in the end has to be the one, taking on the load of the job, of the work. So If it's, I don't know, AWS today for someone building a centralized application that that person needs to pay services for, or do it that cloud storage or Lambda or whatever service they're using from AWS. In the future, this sort of glue service that's in between, that's decentralized, is going to have to be performed by someone. And these are the nodes within the network, and these nodes need to obviously cover their cost. And of course, if not just cover the cost, they need to make something out of it. Otherwise, the service wouldn't be interesting. So having that said, there's absolutely a very big need for decentralization to be fueled by this incentivization, or otherwise a system that doesn't include this won't succeed. That's I absolutely guarantee you that, because today the internet is being incentivized by either someone basically having business models revolve around either data they're collecting on us. So maybe Facebook has your data and that's why it's free, but you pay with your data. Or, and then some other company gets paid by Facebook to run their servers, or whoever. Maybe Facebook is not a good example here. But the point there being that there's a lot of cost being covered by traditional companies running servers, running all the infrastructure, and this infrastructure cannot be the same infrastructure if we want to solve these problems in a decentralized, coordinated way. That's the key factor here.
Yeah, there's a lot of money being made with our data, and we're not making it. We're not the ones making that money, so it needs to change.
It's also a very interesting discussion. There's there's a couple of angles to the debate. Like there's an angle that says it's not really your data, but it's data about you. And then there's the other narrative that it's really your data. No one should be able to reveal your, let's say, browsing history to someone else without your permission. And we can debate all these things. But one thing I believe that's not up for debate is that we need infrastructure and tools to make this work. One way or another, whatever we make it legislatively correct or wrong or whatever, we need the hammers, and we need all the wrenches to build these things. OpenPKG is one of them. This OriginTrail is another. All the consensus layer-based protocol, consensus protocols such as Ethereum, Polkadot, or Zcash, or anything else are all very important to the puzzle. Well, we're basically just stacking up things that need to work together and be tested together to build this. Because as we mentioned NGI a couple of times already, and we talk about GDPR a lot, one key thing to take away from the discussion is that it's not about building the new internet for, I don't know, machines or AI, which I, as a technologist, I believe highly in, and I think are going to build a more positive future. But if we don't take the human into the equation, if we don't build a human-centric internet, so it's something that's usable, something that's understandable, and therefore also tailored in such a way that we can inspect it, that we can understand how it works. Because if you look at AI today, you can quite often read about that we as humans are getting to a point where we no longer understand how it works. The AI is learning so fast that we no longer, it works, but we don't know why, or very few people know, or maybe they claim they know, who knows. But the whole point there being is that we need to be able to inspect these things. We need to be able to review code. We need to be able to see what's going on in an open environment, and this needs to be something that we have power over, we as individuals.
Absolutely. All right, man. I mean, that's why we're all here, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap up.
Yep, we're wrapping up right now.
I'm running out of the battery.
Yep. I was going to close. I was just wondering if you guys wanted to say anything before we go.
Yeah, just to iterate so we're gonna have webinar next week with the BSI. Make sure to subscribe.
And that's at 2 times, 2 different sessions. So
two different sessions, and there's gonna be a recording available and some exciting stuff and content in that webinar. Following that, we're gonna have GS1 webinar. We have already filled all the 100 spots available. And then we have actually we have made additional, I believe, 350 spots available. I think Anna knows better. And but still, be quick in subscribing for GS1 webinar as well. Also following, we have some other things coming out in the next week and the weeks after, so make sure to stay with us. Again, these AMAs and open office hours are intended for us to explain what has happened so far, but we're always happy to give you at least a glimpse into what's about to come. But definitely this is just the things that we have spoken about today are just the hints on what's going to happen. But make sure to follow us on Twitter, make sure to be active in Telegram, and by the time we have the next AMA, it's going to be even more exciting.
I bet. Can't wait for the next few weeks. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and we'll do this again in a few weeks, and it gets better every time. So can't wait.
Thank you very much. And now I need to plug my computer in, otherwise it will die very soon.
All right. Take care, guys. I'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.